There's always that one instance where the perfectly constructed facade of a reality show begins to crumble and everything suddenly makes sense. And that's precisely what transpired in the recent Sister Wives tell-all. It was not just another tension-filled dramatic episode. Rather, it was the first time someone stood up for the truth and not for screen time or fame. And it wasn't from one of the Browns' originals. It was from Christine's new husband, David. What he said brought everything to an abrupt halt. For years, this program has provided us with fragments of heartache, of favoritism, of women gradually disappearing as Cody Brown remained in charge. But nobody ever came forward and told us exactly what this family dynamic actually was. No one really denounced how destructive this system had been to the women involved. Not until David. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't dance around it. He stared into the camera and called it what it was. A system founded on control, on power, and on putting women in competition. Not on love, not on belief, and for sure, not on equality. David wasn't raised in this family. He didn't grow up with the cameras, the public explanations, or the nice furniture. He arrived with open eyes and a heavy heart forged by his own history. Two of his older sisters had once belonged to a polygamist community in Mexico. It wasn't precisely the one Christine had grown up in, but close enough. And what he saw happen to them never left him. He witnessed firsthand how the men in those communities played the women off one another, how they controlled emotions, limited freedom, and ruled their lives. He saw his sisters collapse under pressure and ultimately flee. He saw them rebuild again from scratch. So when David first met Christine, he didn't approach her with romantic visions of plural marriage or blind faith in the Brown family's definition of love. He observed the emotional scars that still lingered on Christine. He identified the same behaviors, the same warning signs, and when he appeared before the tell-all camera, he did something that no other man in this narrative had done. He spoke the truth, completely and without fear. For years, Cody Brown has seemed to be the charming patriarch of this plural family. Loud, boisterous, always professing his love for his wives in equal measure. But beneath the smile was a man fixated on having control. David's words pierced that facade and showed something much uglier. Cody's behavior wasn't simply poor communication or a few bumps in the road. It aligned with almost every indicator of emotional abuse. The gaslighting, the blame shifting, the manipulation, there was all of it. How many times did we watch Christine share her hurt, only to have Cody turn it around? To make her feel as though she was simply jealous, dramatic, or unreasonable. The favoritism wasn't covert. It was transparent. Robyn was never equated with the other wives. While Mary, Janelle, and Christine struggled to be seen, Robyn got all the attention, all the sympathy, all the devotion. And when someone called her out, Cody didn't look inside. He blamed. He made them sound like they were just not good enough for him to love. David didn't buy into that narrative. He told her, plainly, that this wasn't personal. This was an intentional structure meant to keep the women on their toes and at each other's throats. It wasn't chaos. It was control. And in groups like the one his sisters had fled, that sort of behavior between women isn't random. It's fostered. It's used as a means of distraction and division. And when David laid this out, Cody didn't refute it. He responded just as David predicted, defensively, angrily, and by making himself the victim. That response confirmed everything David had asserted. Cody wasn't acting unjustly because he was under pressure or didn't understand. He was a product of a system that could only function based on imbalance and submission, and he employed emotional manipulation to maintain the status quo. He didn't merely fail to love his wives equally, he emotionally harmed them in ways now being openly acknowledged. David's words didn't only reveal Cody. They revealed the reality behind a whole belief system that utilized faith and loyalty to maintain women in a small place, and kept them blaming one another rather than questioning the man at the center. And now that it's been stated, it can't be unspoken. We can't go back to everything was fine. Christine discovered her voice when she departed. David assisted in giving that voice authority. And for the very first time, someone stood before the audience and called attention to the actual issue. Not plural marriage, not family issues, but control. And now, Finally, the truth is known. Cody Brown wasn't simply a man seeking love. He was a man compelled by a desire for control so overpowering, he constructed a whole existence out of it. An existence in which women were simpler to contain if they remained splintered and shattered. For decades, sister wives tiptoed on a high wire, selling us turmoil wrapped in tranquility. TLC invested more than a decade artfully editing moments of emotional neglect, favoritism, and manipulation into family struggles or growing pains. Even the tell-alls, Suki's show, followed that script. Instead of asking tough questions or calling out what audiences obviously witnessed, she went with neutral stories, casting Cody's behavior as just misunderstandings or conflicts in love languages. But the audience witnessed more. We witnessed a masquerade of emotional abuse under the guise of marital conflicts. We witnessed Christine's suffering marginalized, Janelle's frustrations downplayed, and Cody's flakiness labeled as drift. When Christine opened about wanting to be wanted for years, it wasn't presented as a survivor regaining her voice, it was colored as bitterness. When Janelle spoke of fatigue from being excluded and not being heard, it was interpreted as stubbornness. Cody's missing birthdays, avoiding holidays, or prioritizing not talking was not called what it was. It was sugar-coated as personality clashes or growing apart. But the reality went deeper. This wasn't miscommunication, it was control. Control justified by religion and enforced through guilt, gaslighting, and silence. Then David stepped in, and the dynamic changed. He hadn't grown up in this system. He owed nothing to the show or the family name. So when he saw what was actually going on, he called it out. He did not attempt to break the news gently or save Cody's ego. He said what this framework was: a system that trains women to settle for less, to remain silent, to compete for a man's validation like it's a prize. David put it bluntly: the men preferred it this way. They took advantage of the tension between the women. The tension was not an accident, it was deliberate. It maintained the power in one location. His words penetrated the facade that TLC had sustained for more than 10 years. Christine and Janelle were not being obstinate. They were conditioned. They were not being dramatic. They were survivors. And finally, someone on that stage spoke what the audience had been yelling at their TV screens for decades. Christine is living in her truth at last, and it shows in everything she does. She no longer labors under the load she's carried for decades. She laughs from her entire chest now. She stands taller, she speaks boldly, and she stands firmly on her own value. For the first time, she's in a relationship in which she feels heard, safe, and valued. David doesn't shut her up. He listens. He doesn't endure her process. He respects it. This is the kind of love that isn't about heroic gestures or TV perfect moments. It's consistent. It's authentic. It's healing her, not only from Cody, but from the whole system that conditioned her to accept, keep quiet, and be thankful for crumbs. But Cody, he still can't deal with it. Even now that she's moved on, he can't release Christine without attempting to belittle her. At the tell-all, he did what he always does. He wrote off her progress as jealousy, her power as competition. He even stated that she's still trying to be like Robyn. That's how lost he is in his own ego. He can't see that Christine didn't leave Robyn. She left because of him, because he ceased to appear, because he quit. And if you need evidence of how shaken David left him, just observe the way Cody responded. Unflappable, truthful telling apparently unsettled him. David is everything Cody wouldn't be. The sort of man who owns his truth, listens rather than dominates, and nurtures rather than competes. Then came the moment jaws dropped around the world, when Cody finally confessed to premarital sex. Not because people were surprised, but because of how long he'd kept it under wraps. Cody had built himself up for decades as the family's moral centerpiece, particularly when it came to purity and religious values. But behind closed doors, things were different, much different. Secrets he kept only from Robyn and Mary, and never from Christine or Janelle. Why? Because acknowledging it would have broken the divine image he constructed. In their religion, premarital sex isn't only an error, it's a grave offense, one that could have halted his early weddings or affected his reputation in the church. But while keeping this secret, he watched as Robyn gave impassioned talks regarding purity, playing as if she single-handedly bore that weight. The hypocrisy goes deep. She'd been discarded like her history wasn't important. And in the meantime, Cody simply sat there, silent-faced, faking he had no history, no baggage of his own. He assigned shame and guilt to the women in his life, setting an unattainable expectation for them, while quietly concealing his own decisions. For years, he forced a narrative forged on silence and sanctimony. But the moment that made everyone stop cold came when Suki brought up his past, and Cody immediately cut it off with a sharp, almost panicked response. "We're not talking about my sexuality." No one had even brought it up. The topic hadn't turned in that direction, yet Cody slammed the door shut before it even opened. That level of overreacting resonated, not necessarily with him, but with the audience that was watching. Fans were left bewildered, wondering, why so defensive? What is he so scared about people learning? Regardless of if it came from ego, fear, or an underlying insecurity, what was made apparent was that Cody was always more concerned with managing his image rather than speaking the truth. And in that silence, his evasion, his necessity to deflect, David's truth sounded louder than ever. Because, ultimately, David did something that nobody else had ever been brave enough to do on that couch. He broke the illusion that this family ever functioned on equal love. That polygamy, in their world, was simply a varying form of family structure. David didn't refute the narrative. He revealed it for what it actually was: a power, silence, and control-driven system. And the most compelling portion? This truth wasn't spoken by a vengeful ex-wife or an injured child. It was spoken by someone on the outside, someone who observed the destruction, who experienced the dynamics with the blinders of loyalty or shame removed, and refused to be silent. David did not speak on behalf of Christine alone. He spoke on behalf of all women who have ever been asked to hold their tongue, to keep peace, to suffer. For all the women told their suffering was drama, their voice too loud, their expectations too high. With just a few plain-spoken words, David broke through more than 10 years of TV reality sheen. And in doing so, he brought something real and overdue to the forefront: the raw truth.